Welcome everyone to today's panel about the future of ticketing with our esteemed guests, Emil, Tom, and Sandy. Welcome everyone to the show. All right. And thanks for the audience for joining on whatever channel you are, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, or here on Zoom. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. You see that below. We have a Q&A button. If you joined this panel on Zoom, you can ask questions. You can see questions of others. You can upvote them. You have a chat window. You can chat with other panelists. Feel free to do that. This is an open session, and we'll have a Q&A in the end. But feel free to drop your questions, discuss with the panelists. So excited for this panel today with our esteemed guests, again, about the future of ticketing. I'm Marc, I'm the founder of 51. We're a research and market intelligence company focused on Web3 and AI. We work with brands like Ljesnjanin, MoonPay. We help them scale and grow for enterprise adoption. And one of the topics we tackle is ticketing and the future of ticketing. And that's what we're going to speak about today. Global ticketing faces challenges. Fans get priced out. Bots and scalpers run the game. Artists and organizers lose millions in revenue to predatory resellers. Every major event, whether it's Taylor Swift Eras Tour or the Super Bowl or global music festivals, follow the same pattern: instant sellouts, skyrocketing resale prices, and counterfeit tickets flooding the market. And today we're going to discuss about all those challenges, but we're also going to discuss solutions, and we're going to talk with builders, building companies that solve those problems. We're going to have industry veterans on the panel. And before we jump into the questions, let's introduce ourselves. Maybe let's start with Emil, and then you go to Tom, and then to Sandy.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Emil. I'm the CEO and founder here at Tixbase, an end-to-end ticketing platform.
My name's Sandy Khaund. I'm the founder and CEO of Credenza, which is a blockchain solution for sports rights holders. Previously and most relevant to this conversation, about 10 years ago, I started a different blockchain ticketing company called Upgraded that was acquired by Live Nation and Ticketmaster in 2018. Spent a couple of years there, and now I've moved on to a different blockchain company since 2022. I'll pass it on to Tom.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom McDonald. I'm the Senior Vice President of Ticket Sales and Service here in Toronto with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. We manage a number of different venues and sports teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Marlies, the AHL affiliate, the Toronto Raptors in the NBA, and G League affiliate, Raptors 905. We have an MLS team with Toronto FC. We have a CFL football team, the Toronto Argonauts. We also have a pretty robust relationship with our friends at Live Nation, managing their premium seating at Bud Stage, which is a Live Nation-owned amphitheater venue here in Toronto, along with a couple other clubs. And we're also opening a new outdoor 50,000-person stadium with Live Nation this summer called Rogers Stadium, north of the city, our first largest outdoor venue in Toronto. So lots of different properties, all in ticketing, looking after both sales, suites, and service.
All right, thank you for that. Again, it's a pleasure to have you all on the panel today. Let's jump in with the first topic, which is the state of ticketing, what's broken. And I really want to frame this correctly here and help our listeners to understand what are the current challenges and issues and also demands that you see from a customer and fan side when it comes to ticketing. And maybe Tom, you can start it off here.
Yeah, I want to answer that from a perspective of managing the number of venues and teams that we do. Ticketmaster obviously is the largest player in ticketing solutions. They were built and are built primarily to sell a lot of tickets all at the same time. Where I think there are real opportunities, not only with Ticketmaster, but other ticketing solutions is providing some customization and personalization with the fan journey in mind of when fans come to venues, how we are communicating with them and really enhancing their experience within the venue itself, all through the ticket. I think there's a ton of opportunity in that space, and I'm excited about what's to come in future.
Emil and Sandy, you've both built or are building companies that solve some of these challenges. What was your thinking or your rationale when you started your ticketing startups or companies? Where did you see the opportunity in the market?
Yeah, maybe I should go first because I started it earlier, and I think Emil probably came in a very different landscape for ticketing. So the evolution of the, to Marc, to your point about, what's going on with ticketing, the state of ticketing when I started the company in 2015, and I think, what's happened since and now what Emil deals with on an everyday basis is probably a little different. So it's worth talking about that. The impetus for me starting Upgraded in 2015 was built largely at the very beginning around counterfeit ticketing. The idea that tickets were traditionally PDFs, they were passed around, and there were always two big problems with the PDF tickets. One was you didn't know what happened to the ticket after you gave it away. There was no tracking of who actually used the ticket. How did they get the ticket? Was it given by, was it given away? Was it sold on a secondary market? Was it sold on Craigslist? So there was a bit of a tracking there. And then someone could print out 10 copies, sell it on Craigslist. First person gets into the venue. The next 9 people do not get into the venue. So that was largely where Upgraded had started sort of its experience on what it wanted to do. Ultimately, the idea of mobile ticketing really curtailed both the provenance of the ticket, basically by attaching it to an account, and typically it was a Ticketmaster account, as well as the ability of knowing how the person got the ticket, because there were actual transfers that were done, as much as they weren't always easily done. And I think people had a lot of complaints about the ease of use of getting a ticket from one person to another. But for us, ours evolved into a little bit more of a, how do we think about rules and entitlements around that ticket? How does a comp ticket not get transferred? If it's a free ticket, you shouldn't be able to see that on Craigslist. Or what else can you do with that ticket besides getting into the front gate? And that's where the evolution was kind of going at the time. Although when I was at Ticketmaster, we ran into COVID, and that completely changed everything about everything. That's 5 years ago right now. And that kind of curtailed what I think what I had certainly hoped to do with my tenure at Ticketmaster, because I ended up leaving about 6 months later.
Emil, did you think about similar challenges when you started Tixbase?
Actually, I was going to say that was a great hook coming from Sandy. When I started Tixbase, I actually started Tixbase because I was one of those victims that kept on constantly buying fake tickets on the secondary marketplaces. One thing about me, I do travel a lot for the games. I like to visit different types of venues and seeing what takes place inside of the venue. But it wasn't until 2017 when I traveled to Champions League game in Cardiff City, Juventus versus Real Madrid. Great game. But it was actually filled with frustration because I ended up purchasing a ticket on Viagogo. Ticket ended up coming in the mail as a hard copy. Ended up traveling to London, then from London taking a taxi to travel up to Cardiff to go to the game, ending up in front of the gates and being told this ticket doesn't work. And then that whole frustration kicks in where you have to call, you have to go through the entire paying process of figuring out what to do now. Eventually, these problems, they do get solved because it is the marketplace's job to ensure that the tickets end up in your hands or you get your refund back. But that wasn't enough, because I actually ended up experiencing the same problem in 2018 when I traveled to Kiev to watch Liverpool get absolutely demolished by Real Madrid. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that game. I want to forget about that. I want to forget about that entire experience in general. But back to the point, really. On that plane ride back from Kiev to United States, I just couldn't accept the fact that this is the norm under which people live, buy tickets and attend events. Just, there was that frustration and anger point that has completely overtaken me. And then I really started looking into the ticketing industry. And one thing that I kept on stumbling upon, all of the ticketing marketplaces pretty much operate the same exact way. They have this fancy front end, but in the back end, it's all the same infrastructure. I've seen an opportunity to build an infrastructure from ground zero that basically not just solves an issue on the secondary market, but also solves the issue on the primary market. One of the most important things is knowing who actually buys that ticket on the primary market, knowing it by the first name and last name basis. That's one. Second, knowing that that person who actually bought that ticket with a legitimate payment method, and then that the event organizer isn't facing any sort of potential chargebacks in the due process, because that's one of the very big issues in the ticketing industry as well. And then once that process goes through, they receive the ticket. Now they can take this ticket, as Sandy said, make hundreds or thousands of PDF copies, sell them in front of the stadium or on some of these other ticketing marketplaces, and then just basically prey on there will be a victim, there will be defrauded. So my whole thing is I wanted to bond an identity to the ticket, and I wanted to follow the ticket's life cycle from the moment that it was sold to the moment that it was resold on the secondary marketplace, from the moment that it starts actually transferring from peer to peer, and following the entire ticket's life cycle. That was the whole point. But then once I really got into this industry, I have seen this whole world of the opportunities and everything else that we can do, and how basically the industry is so broken into so many different elements. So I've seen an opportunity of actually now tying additional components to the tickets, such as fans' behavior from the moment they purchase a ticket, how do they interact on the game day, what did they purchase, and the whole component of the ticket's life cycle from the start to finish.
And Tom, when you hear Emil talk, when you hear Sandy talk, you as an industry veteran, you've been 25 years or more in the ticketing industry. How do you think about those problems and how do you solve them today?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that jump out at me, and data is such a critical piece to all of this from a security standpoint, for one, but two, just in customizing and personalizing that experience that Emil is talking about in our venues. I think about stored value solutions when you give away a ticket to a colleague or client, and you want to take care of their meal in the venue, being able to provide those types of solutions for clients and customers, providing in-venue experience such that if you're in the upper bowl of a venue, you were given the tickets, you didn't pay for them yourself, but you see empty seats in the lower bowl and you're happy to pay, a nominal amount while in the venue to upgrade your seat. Not only do you then get to upgrade, but the seats that you just left become available for someone else. Creating and talking about those solutions are ones that this industry needs to jump into. I feel like there's just so much opportunity for us in the ticketing space to start to create these experiences for fans that they're demanding and that we want to provide them.
Okay, so I think we framed the problem really well here, and I want to look at some of the solutions out there in the market. And obviously, something that we're going to talk about today is blockchain. Maybe Sandy, starting with you. You built a blockchain-based application. Why did you start with blockchain? Why did you choose that technology to solve that particular problem that you did with Upgraded?
Yeah, I always think about going back to what I kind of described as the problem, and I think Emil kind of agreed with me, and he had the specific instances for where he dealt with it. But this idea of when one digital asset can be transferred to another owner and the originator of the asset no longer has it, that is what the blockchain kind of does. It creates this universal ledger that not only everybody can read into, but everybody can validate. One of the other pieces that's important about the blockchain, because if you think about it, a ticket is it's a token, right? It really is. It's the original token. It's a token that gives you permission to enter an arena, and that token does have value. And that's where the blockchain's at its best, not only in the ability to know who the exact owner is, as Emil described, but one of the other things we talked about quite a bit was when you thought about what resale could be, and particularly for us at the Upgraded at the outset, the other example that I always thought of that really inspired it was, I believe it was in 2015 or 2016, Guns N' Roses decided to reunite and go back on tour, right? And I was a huge Guns N' Roses fan, and I saw the ticket on Craigslist, and they basically said that they were playing at Oracle Park in San Francisco near where I live, and the guy was offering it for face value the day of the event. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. And then I just sat there and I just stared at it, and I'm like, this is Craigslist. How do I know? And the biggest problem is that it's like, okay, he's like 2 tickets, $300, right? And I'm like, okay, I can get somebody to go with me. $300, it's a great deal. And so then the problem becomes, give me the tickets and I'll give you the money. And he's saying, no, give me the money and I'll give you the tickets, right? Who's going to go first? It's like almost a little bit of a Mexican standoff, right? The guns faced at each other. because you've heard a lot of stories about, haha, I got the tickets, too late, I'm gone, or haha, I got the money, what are you going to do about it? Because I was somebody that you're not going to be able to trace or anything like that. And so there've been a lot of situations like that. One of the beauties of blockchain, if you think about it, not just as a token, not just as an identity, but as a mechanism for escrow that says, and we actually had this built in where it's like you could put the ticket in escrow and whoever comes up with the money, it basically locks in money in crypto because the crypto works beautifully in this situation. Crypto goes to the seller, tickets go to the buyer, right? And so all the different mechanisms and all the extensibility that you could do with blockchain, because it is this programmable platform, that's what really got us excited, was to try to think, how does this ticket become more than a ticket? How do you create these constructs on the fact that because this is an open digital asset, you can create a lot more transaction capabilities, you can create a lot more environments. And this was before I was at Ticketmaster. And then, of course, I love Ticketmaster resale. But the idea is that how do you not grow this reliance on third-party two-sided marketplaces? How do you create the opportunity for peer-to-peer marketing so that it's like, I just want to sell the ticket. I do want to navigate around the fees that are there. And I used to say, and it was my crosshairs was StubHub, right? So even easier, but like StubHub used to charge basically 30% on that transaction, and they were an insurance company, right? They didn't guarantee that the ticket, and Emil said this earlier, right? They didn't guarantee that you would have the ticket. They did say, in case this is a fraudulent ticket, we will get you into the building, right? Never fear, right? I'm sick, but I have insurance, I'll be covered. And I was trying to say, don't get sick. Like, how do we inoculate you in the first place so you don't get sick? And blockchain felt like the right opportunity because of the veracity of the ownership and creating all these sorts of things. So for me, as a programmable platform, it allowed us not only to target the core problem, which is the provenance of the ticket owner and the user, but also how to create more efficiency and optimization in those transactions. So suddenly the dependence on third parties could be reduced.
And if you think back now, Sandy, this was almost 10 years ago. Do you still think the same? And if yes, why?
Yeah,
no?
I have great love and respect for Ticketmaster, and watching what they did, I actually still think they're a great company. And that's not to say that Emil doesn't have a great solution that could be an alternative, but I do like what Ticketmaster does. And I think they've solved some of those problems that were the biggest problems in 2015 or 2017. I do also think, and this goes not only to what Emil said, but what Tom said, there is the ability to think more broadly about what ticketing is. And I keep thinking about any situations about problems, but also opportunities. And sometimes the problem is the path to the opportunity. When I think about the provenance of the ticket, when I think about the ownership and making sure that you don't have the experiences that Emil had when he was going to these football matches and kind of left out in the cold, I think we're doing better handling those problems. But the opportunity, as Tom described, talking about data and how does the data of understanding who's in the building and being able to, in real time, be able to cater to them to say, hey, you're the kind of person that wants to go from the 300 level to the 100 level. How do we become very dynamic about this information to target the right person with the right sort of metadata around the individual, because we know who's in that seat? That is a huge, huge opportunity for revenue, for customer satisfaction, for fan engagement, whatever name you want to put on it. It all starts with the ticket, because the ticket is the digital tether. It's the one piece when you're in the building that forces you into the application. It's like, great, we know you're here now. Now we've got a lifeline. We can talk to you. We're going to send you updates. We're going to remind you that we've got Molson on tap back there, and you got to get your Molson. And we know you like Molson because you went there last time. That's what I think. It's a Pandora's box. It's opening a door of all these other amazing other things that you can do when someone is actually in the venue. And that's the part that I get more excited about in 2025 than in 2015, when I just wanted to make sure that I would get into that Guns N' Roses concert, legitimately.
Yeah, I love that discussion, by the way. We already thinking about how can we take this beyond security and beyond fraud prevention and really make the ticketing as a core part of the experience. And I would like us to keep thinking about that now in the next question when we hear from Emil how Tixbase solved one of those problems. And I would love if also, Tom, you as a veteran who hears now what Tixbase is building to have a critical eye on that and maybe ask some questions that are unclear or also challenges that you see with these solutions. And then once we have that, we can also expand it again and see what's there beyond fraud prevention and where can we take those solutions that are on the market right now and what's still there to build. So let's switch over to Emil. Emil, if you could tell us, what is Tixbase actually doing and why does it use blockchain and what problems do you solve for your clients?
That's a great question. Would you like me to first answer why are you using blockchain?
Yes, please.
Perfect. The reason why we are using blockchain is because we are building this completely new ticketing operating system from the ground zero. And what that means is we are taking into the account all of the current issues that are persisting in the ticketing space. Security and fraud are some of the big ones, as well as the regulated resale market. But there is so much more beyond that. As Sandy said, ticket is just a Trojan horse to the number of different opportunities that open up out there. And it is this trustless environment that allows you to conduct business without relying on someone to conduct their part of the business, such as, let's take, for example, a case with a live industry promoter who is doing an event for Travis Scott, someone that has to put up a $1.7 million up front to secure that contract with Travis Scott. That's a big ask to put up right up front, for someone that you don't know if they will actually show up to the event, right? But what if we do the following? What if we tell the artist, instead of us giving a lump sum of money at the beginning of the event, why don't we create a smart contract and program the smart contract where we're giving you a percentage of every ticket sold? And we can do the same thing with the venue and the other parties. So now this becomes an actual financial tool that basically dictates at the time of the ticket sale who gets paid and what proceeds they get. And then you program the smart contract that basically says, unlock these funds once the event is concluded and everyone gets paid. That's, in my opinion, one of the true values of blockchain itself: smart contracts, wallets, so on and so forth. But now we can take that component and we can take this concept and we can apply it in the sports, where if you have a ticketing company, like the one ticketing company that we are working with in Turkey, basically we power up their ticketing engine that currently exists and has existed for the last 12 years. And they are looking to regulate the resale market. They are looking to recover some of that revenue from those tickets sold on the secondary market. What if we now program the smart contract that says ticketing company will get their proceed from the primary market, the club will get their proceed, the football federation will get their proceed, the fan will get their proceed, and taxation department will get their proceed. Now, using that component bonding and identity to every single ticket, now you are kind of enforcing the regulated resale because you know who the fan is, and you can enforce all these rules and regulations that you currently are unable to enforce with all the ticketing companies that are out there. Ticketmaster is a great ticketing company, pioneer in the space. Ticketmaster doesn't really have a problem selling tickets. Rather than Ticketmaster is sort of looking for all these solutions that they're coming up in the market and they're looking to adopt them. Perfect example is they've seen an opportunity in the solution that Sandy has built, and they're looking at other solutions that they're being built, implemented, and actually being used so that they can take advantage of this infrastructure and apply it to their daily use.
Okay. Thank you, Emil. I think this was clear to me. Tom, if you hear that as someone from the traditional side of the ticketing space, what goes through your mind?
Well, I think as I hear Emil and Sandy both talk, I am so excited about just the changes that are coming. I have been front lines and seen fans disappointed with fraudulent tickets like we talked about earlier. I also, behind the scenes, can appreciate those events with smaller promoters and that financial concern that Emil just raised. So I'm excited about just the opportunities that present with just this new evolving technologies and solutions and options for venue that go beyond traditional ticketing providers. There are things that we are not even thinking about today that will be implemented as a result of blockchain solutions that solve problems that we're not thinking about today, that make us more efficient, that allow us to manage data and create that experience for fans that is secure, but personalized, customizable, transferable. And it's just this is where the industry needs to go. I would say that ticketing in general, my perspective, has been slow to adopt to innovation as compared to some other industries. And I think it's because there's just been just so few big players out there. But it just means that the future is super exciting for all of us and changes around the corner.
If I can just add to Tom's point, another reason really why a lot of like sporting teams in particular, the ones that I'm speaking to, why they're slow to adopt new technologies is because, first of all, they're tied to a very long-term contract with the existing players. And then those contracts aren't with the ticketing companies. They're also crowd access control companies that have been in the space for the longest. Now, how do you bring a solution to the market to ensure that industry standard of 1 second allowing a person to scan their ticket and go in? That has been one of the key issues. Then the second issue becomes around internet connectivity at the stadium. Let's keep in mind, not all the stadiums have the greatest internet connectivity. Not all the stadiums have the state-of-the-art infrastructure. Most of them are behind. We have seen Yankees go through building a completely brand new stadium. We have seen a number of different teams going through that process of building a brand new stadium. These stadiums are compatible to bring on this technology. Some other stadiums around the world, they are not. One trend that I'm actually seeing is we are actually seeing clubs downsizing the number of the seats just to ensure that they can actually provide family-friendly zones where they can come in with the kids and have this like next level of fan engagement, but also bring additional added values to the stadiums. We have seen stadiums take out seats and add restaurants throughout the facility. Udinese, which is a football club in Italy, they downsized from 50,000 fans down to 25,000 fans. But the facility that they have now built is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful.
Thank you, Emil. All right, let's, Sandy, also, I would love to hear from you. Like if you listen to Emil, and you obviously know you use blockchain technology as well in your company, how do you now think about that? What goes through your mind? Blockchain is a one-size-fits-it-all solution, or is it part of the solution?
Yeah, I do think it's part of the solution. It's a core part of the solution. It's very important. And, a couple of things to think about, again, sort of putting the separation between having started 10 years ago and what the blockchain was. Keep in mind, I started before Ethereum was on the Homestead release, right? It was on the Frontier release. So I actually started with colored coins. So I've seen an evolution. I've been on Ethereum Classic, on Block Apps, on Quorum. I've been on Parity. I've been on a lot of different blockchains that have had, their pros and cons. And as you walk through it, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you think about just blockchain in general, absent ticketing, but just talking about blockchain, and it had the big boom in 2017 where crypto kind of became the big thing. And then in 2021, you had sort of the NFT boom. I keep talking about 2025 as blockchain 3.0. And learning the lessons, and I used to work at Microsoft, and Microsoft always said, we always got it right on V3. It was all about V3. I think there's mistakes from V1 and V2 that I think I hope that the blockchain environment, the blockchain community kind of recognize. The first of all is that you want to make the technology accessible, right? Once upon a time, like people were like, great, blockchain ticketing, Sandy, where's the MetaMask filter? I'm like, you can't get 20,000 people into Tom's building and expect them all to have MetaMask filters. And by the way, they're getting in with their phones. How do you do something like that? So this idea of making sure that the technology is easy to use, some people call it Web 2.5. It's just, you almost have to sacrifice a little bit of the purity of what the blockchain is trying to do, because you want to focus on the customer and the client, the customer being the Maple Leafs fan and the client being Tom. And it's like, okay, well, what does he want? He wants as few complaints as possible from customers saying, how does this thing work? And even having done it on the Ticketmaster side, where we moved over to a technology called SafeTix, which was everything was digital ticketing and you had a rotating barcode. It's not easy. You have to operate with the lowest common denominator in terms of digital sophistication. This goes to Emil's point about, and the Wi-Fi even strong enough to do the sort of operations you want to do. Now, I feel like 2021 let down the blockchain world a little bit, even though it seemed like a great boom. because it was more about exclusivity. It was more about scarcity. It was more about the haves and the have-nots. Tom, running a number of different teams, does not have the luxury of saying, only the cool kids can come to my stadium, only the cool kids can come to my arena. So making the technology more accessible, making it easier. One of the things I always like to tell this story, but in 2019, I spoke at a blockchain conference and I got up on stage and I said, look, Ticketmaster does 450 million tickets on the blockchain. I would love to put every single one of them on the blockchain, but I can't and I won't. Why? Because the throughput, the latency, all the things, the expense, just the amount it costs to be able to do it, it would be untenable. And you're dealing with 50,000 people outside an NFL stadium 5 minutes before kickoff, buzzed because they've been drinking for the last 2 hours in tailgate, and you're asking them to wait for 2 minutes and pay $5 for a transaction that transfers a ticket. It's not there. But the beauty of what's happened in the last 5 years is that, since I made that comment, is blockchains have gotten cheaper, they've gotten faster, they've gotten better, they've gotten the throughput. We're approaching Visa speeds. And so these amazing new blockchain technologies have allowed this to become a reality. But we still have to make sure that the end user has an easy onboard. It's all about the user experience right now, because if you create any additional friction, there will be resistance. And the minute there's resistance, Tom's life goes to hell, because basically now he's got to run after and he's got to complain. Seriously, just doing it on the phone, we would get these special interest stories where local newscasters would be like, this poor guy's been a Jet season ticket holder for 35 years and they're making him go digital and he doesn't have a phone. And it's like he's the one guy out of 50,000 people in that stadium. But that's what people are going to hear. So it's a very hard thing to thread, because we are talking about so much money. We're talking about so many people, and the whole idea, and to Emil's point, and the experience is changing. We're trying to make it more inviting. It's actually, sports is getting closer to hospitality than anybody talks about. We don't talk about this enough, right? If anybody's seen the TV show The Bear, I always like to bring this up, right? But they're so particular about how they deal with each customer at these Michelin star restaurants. And that's what sports can get to, the unique experience between three people going to a football match, and one of them's a big fan, one of them's a casual fan, and one of them still calls it soccer, but is trying to learn. We deserve different experiences for that. I think the blockchain can be a path to that. And I think all three of us have been talking a little bit around this idea of how does data, when combined to the ticket holder, create a unique experience for that ticket holder that is consistent with what they're trying to get out of the game.
Yeah, Sandy, I completely agree with you with those challenges that we saw in the last 5 years. I mean, we looked at hundreds of consumer brands and use cases, and most of the issues around those experiences were UX that was too slow, too sloppy, too complicated, or again, transaction speed, transaction fees. And at the same time, I believe we've solved a lot of those challenges in the last couple of years. And I want to ask Emil, if you look at your solution, is it still more complicated?
No, absolutely not. This actually reminds me of the movie about Steve Jobs, when he sold his first Apple computer and they didn't have any casing. All the wires were completely exposed. And right after that, he said, we have a version 2.0 coming out that everything is completely hidden. All the wires are hidden. So to Sandy's point, yes, we have gone through the process where we had to understand blockchain. We actually had to understand the consumers, and we had to remove the complexity from the due process. We had to teach people that you don't need cryptocurrency to buy a ticket. You can do it with your credit card, your debit card. It works exactly the same way. But one of the most challenging components was building a wallet that does not require a fan to remember their seed phrase. This was a must. You had to build a wallet that was just as easy to obtain as signing up for your Google account. And it should be really quick. It should be really fast. You should actually not even know that you are signing up for an account and that you are given a wallet. All this should happen in the background. And once you sign up and your account is verified, then you're told you have this cool feature about your account where event organizer can now see all the events that you have attended, and they can provide certain airdrops, whether it's tickets or collectible memorabilia, Or now you can build this entire membership program around it, where after you collected 18 tickets in a season, you can be given this like a poster, which is a collectible memorabilia of the team at the end of the season and all that stuff. So my team, we have done a really great job, and this is not supposed to be a sales pitch, but we have done a really good job in hiding all the wires and all the complexities around blockchain. Nowadays, when we are speaking to the customers, blockchain isn't even mentioned in the conversation. It's just a better ticketing infrastructure that allows you to do things you weren't able to do before. And then it gives you this set of tools to enforce all these rules and laws. And I'm seeing a question in the chat about, can you limit the cost of a ticket on the resale market? The answer is yes. You can do all kinds of cool things around it. You can also allow for a ticket not to be transferred or to be sold. You can do a number of things. That's the beauty of this infrastructure, that it allows you to program the ticket in the way that you want to program it, which is why it's called the smart ticket.
And before we jump into the last part where we talk about what's possible beyond fraud prevention and traceability, I want to launch here a quick poll for the audience. You can see it now at the bottom, just to track a little bit the state of adoption. Have you used a blockchain-based ticket yet? Yes or no? Let's let people vote and go into the last part. So Sandy, you mentioned ticketing becomes almost a hospitality play. Tom, you mentioned you are thinking in a lot of different directions of what could you add to the ticketing experience beyond the ticket itself. I want to explore that a little bit and maybe start with you, Tom. What are some of the applications, directions you look at your company?
Yeah, I mentioned stored value, which is a big one. Being able to put a dollar amount tied to the ticket that allows the guest to then go buy a jersey or go into a restaurant and have a meal and or a beer. That's a big one. The in-seat upgrade stuff I mentioned as well, being able to move. But there's also the understanding the customer and their preferences for future sales. It might be targeting knowing that a fan went into the store and was browsing at buying a sweater or jersey, but didn't. And then being able to market to that fan following the event a discounted offer for a specific jersey that they in fact didn't buy, and just having the technology and the knowledge of that fan and the experience they had so that we can bring other different products to them based on the experience that they had in the venue. There is so many different opportunities for us to do that. There's a lot of different venues that are doing things about like notifying fans of shorter washroom lines in the venue and or shorter lines at concession stands. So that very quickly is going to become like table stakes. But there's so many other opportunities beyond the event, following the event, to promote and drive incremental additional sales beyond the footprint of the arena.
Are you already doing that?
We're not. We haven't got the throttle all the way down on that one. We're starting to do it, but I would not say we're in the fast lane just yet.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, if you don't mind, just to Tom's point, we are currently speaking to one of the biggest venues actually in the world. And everything that Tom said is what they're looking to do and implement, because they understand tickets is just the Trojan horse to a lot of things that they can get access to. But now this additional data points that they want to implement so that they can understand their fan better, so that they can cater to them with the better marketing packages, and that will actually help them at the end of the day to increase the revenue per seat, because that's what it's all about to these teams and the clubs at the end of the day.
There is a ton of investment being made into venues, and a lot of it is tied to the premium side of the experience. Whether it's clubs and restaurants, the size and quality of the seats, the digital features that are in their armrests in seats within venues to complement and enhance the experience that premium customers are having at venues. It's a really interesting time because it I've had a couple of people talk about like, it kind of feels like the old Coliseum days where you have like the general fans, where the masses who are in the upper bowls, where they don't even have a seat. And then there's the, aristocrats like down below that are, sipping their wine and have all of the amenities presented to them. It does, in many ways, right or wrong, it does feel like a lot of venues are kind of moving back to that type of experience for fans. Again, I'm not sure it's right, but it certainly seems to be the trend.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about with all this is, and I think about the evolution of certainly the challenge that, Tom with his career has kind of seen quite a bit. But at one point in time, it was really about how do we know as many people who were in the building as possible, right? And there was probably a window where it's like you probably knew. I remember the numbers being quoted about 10 years ago, like we know 15% or 20% because we're not seeing who the tickets transferred to, and we're not seeing like any of that information. And I think we're getting better and better about that. I think the idea of having the identity of the user is, and I know at Ticketmaster there was a phrase called names to file because you wanted as many email addresses as possible, right? And at some point in time, you have to recognize, certainly in 2025, the value of an email address is kind of whittled down because people just, and especially the younger generation, doesn't care as much about email addresses. But I think that this next wave of what I believe we're going to get to is this idea, and we're all touching on it a little bit, but I think it's even broader than maybe some of the things brought up here, is that how do you build a richer profile around each of those people that we now know are in the building? And one of the things that I like to talk about, and again, not a shameless plug for my company, but a lot of the things that we kind of evangelize is everybody talks about the 360 view, but I like thinking about the 365 view, which is the 365 days a year that Emil is a football fan, or the people in Toronto that treat hockey as a religion, right? Like there is no off day for being a Toronto Maple Leafs fan in Toronto. And this idea of, yes, there is the season and there are the playoffs, and hopefully you're lucky enough with the Stanley Cup, but they also care about the draft, and they also care about the off-season acquisitions. And I always like to use the example in football and the NFL, right? If you take a look right now, I guarantee if I were to look at, maybe today's a little different because college basketball is having its day in the sun, but on typical days over the last couple of weeks, the NFL has dominated the headlines, even though there hasn't been a game in the last month, and there isn't going to be another game for another 5-6 months, right? But people are just obsessed with football. And it's the Super Bowl, but then suddenly it's the combine and it's the draft. And then when the draft happens, and there's also free agency, and you can kind of start really differentiating between the crazed fans and the casual fans and the people that are just there because they're at a morale event. And the idea of recognizing what they're doing outside of the venue allows for an even richer experience when you're inside the venue. Because when Tom's thinking about who wants to upgrade to these seats on the first level, who wants to move into the aristocracy, it's almost like, oh yeah, it's this person who is obsessed. And, I say it in every panel I ever do, but I'm the biggest Baltimore Orioles fan in the world, but I live 3,000 miles away from the stadium. So when I show up, treat me with regard, because I watch 150 games on MLB TV, and I own a bunch of jerseys in my closet, and there's probably a dozen hats in this house that are Orioles hats, right? How do you make that experience special for me, that even though I've only gone once a year and somebody else goes 5 times a year, I'm going once a year because I live 3,000 miles away, but I'm obsessed with this team. And the guy that goes 5 times a year is only going because he lives basically around the corner and it's something to do on a Thursday night, right? That's where hospitality goes to that next level. When you have that metadata that goes not only with what happens inside the venue, but because sports is 365, even though it's only like 40 Leafs games in the building a year, not counting playoffs, those other 320 days are very important for any of those 40 days when somebody actually shows up.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I would love to hear from you, Tom. Maybe before we go into the Q&A, if you hear that, and also referring to what you said before, Tom, what's the biggest challenge in creating that 365-degree experience?
Yeah, and we've actually, I'll verify what Sandy is saying. The majority of our customers come 1 or 2 times a year. like the vast majority, are coming into our venue. And to his point, they're no less fans than the few that actually do come all the time. And so our opportunity is engaging with and continuing to connect with those fans even outside of our venue. We have a number of initiatives that we're about to launch that speak to addressing that very issue, whereby we are creating experiences for those fans outside of and beyond our events. And whether that's through, again, merch, whether it's through practices, whether a lot of it has to do with content and more or less creating these expanded fan clubs that give people a regular taste and a piece of what it is to be a Maple Leaf fan, creating some of those content pieces to engage people not only 70 miles around our stadium, but globally. Those are opportunities that we are super excited about. And then it's trying to then commercialize those opportunities such that it's feeding back into your commercial goals. So really, really exciting time on all that, and things that, Maple Leaf Sports is a large organization with multiple teams and venues that we are really, really leaning into, but we're not alone. There's other companies and venues that are also looking at this space.
Great discussion. And again, people in the audience, you have the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A panel. You can upvote and see others participants' questions. I also resolved the poll. 56% answered that they have used a blockchain-based ticket. So that's quite a lot, and it's probably a bit skewed with our audience, but that's the poll. So first question from the audience coming from Ray Khan: wouldn't adding NFC tap technology into the tickets allow for a store of value that Tom just mentioned, value for merch, direct to fan promotions or discounts?
I can take that question if you like. It's something that we are already adding, and it's something that we have already been discussing with a number of the clubs. One question with one of the clubs that we actually just are working on onboarding is, how do you actually know who owns your jersey, who buys your jerseys, who are the owners of the jerseys, and they actually don't. What if now you have an opportunity where you can add NFC chip into the emblem of the jersey, and you can store that person's information there, and you can send them offers into that technology that will allow them to get offers around getting a new jersey, getting added to the pre-sale of the tickets to some much more competitive matches, or simply using that technology as a way to actually also get into the jersey. So all of the tickets that you have, you can actually store on that NFC and you can walk right through it. Furthermore, you can enhance that technology by storing payments in there as well. Some of the venues are already introducing cashless systems and cardless systems where you can just walk up, scan your NFC chip or your card, pay it, and be out.
Thank you, Emil. And then we have another question from Harold Spencer Jr. He's asking, is privacy being considered as part of implementing ticketing on blockchain and smart contracts? Given GDPR in Europe, would smart contracts make it easier to meet those requirements?
We are working in European Union, so we are fully GDPR compliant. One of the things that we understood that we had to actually do is, instead of building on a permissionless blockchain, build on permission blockchain where we allow vetted participants to sell tickets and conduct tickets. At the same time, conduct the full KYC on the users, bond identity to the ticket, and in a cryptographic way store their information. So we want to allow you to actually go on Explorer and see the users, wallet history or all sorts of other assets that they have in their wallet that's completely hidden, as well as their personal data information. The only folks that are having access to this information is the club, the league, and the governing bodies that want to have access to this information to monitor the full operation of the events.
Thank you, Emil.
Just real quick, I think a lot of people, like right now, there are times when I will buy a ticket off of a secondary market and I will see the person that originally had the ticket, their email address will be on it. It's kind of a violation of PII when I've bought resold tickets. And ultimately, when you're using public keys, when you're using these pseudonymized sort of identities, as opposed to Sandy at credenza3.com or something like that, that's goodness in protecting the people who are involved in the situation, right? That's the block, again, and to Emil's point, like as long as there's somebody that knows who that identity is so that there is some sort of active recourse in case you need to go back to it. But the actual parties that are performing a transaction with one another, there's no reason I need to know who originally had the ticket or anything like that. I'd rather know that it's legitimate, know that it was owned by somebody, and know where, if there's some sort of resale transaction that happens, the money kind of gets routed to it. So, and just by the way, a quick side note about your poll, I have to say something here. So I think it was 50 some percent.
56, yeah.
I can tell you right now, that's low, because a lot of people have used the blockchain ticket, not a ticket that's obviously on a blockchain, but that is what my company did back in the day. And that's what we were inside of Ticketmaster. And there were millions of tickets that actually went through a blockchain. It was an internal blockchain. It's a long story why, other than the fact that we were more about the smart contract than we were about the decentralization and the open network of it. But there was the technology that was used, and we did that with a lot of tickets. And the whole point, that the reason why I'm kind of proud of this, is that no one knew. You didn't know that you were on the blockchain. There was a lot that we could do with it. But I know literally a couple of years ago, I got tickets from someone, and I'm like, and I looked at the URL, and I saw like a little, sometimes it's a little, it almost makes me misty-eyed, right? It's like seeing something about my kids. It's like I saw the little signature of the URL. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a ticket that's using the technology that we had built out on top of the blockchain. And I don't know if they still run that same technology right now. I haven't talked to anybody specifically about that. But the truth is that when we even did it at Ticketmaster, the whole point was you weren't supposed to know you were on the blockchain any more than, are you on AWS or are you on Azure? Or doesn't make a difference, right? Is the experience good to you? And that's where blockchain really needs to get to, is that it's not the star of the show the way it has been with cryptocurrency or the way it was with NFTs. It's just one additional technology that creates all this sort of opportunity that we've been describing for the last hour.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy, for mentioning that. We're already running out of time here. It was great to have the discussion with you. Super interesting. Emil, Tom, Sandy, thanks for joining, and thanks everyone in the audience for tuning in on whatever channel you tuned in. This is a interesting and a super relevant topic. We're going to publish a report on that soon, so stay tuned for all attendees. You're going to get that dropped in your email address. And yes, thanks for joining. And also thanks to Avalanche for making this webinar possible. They're one of our partners. And frankly, I've been in the space for many, many years, and they're one of the greatest blockchains out there. And by the way, also the blockchain that Emil is building on. All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Emil.
Thank you for having us, Marc. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.